Hey there, all you cool cats and kittens. This is Mr. Braunwert with more examples from section 5.3. Go ahead and take a second to write this down really quick. Just like before, we're going to be solving this for x. So I see a 4, a sine, a squared, and a 2. So hopefully, the 4 is going to move over first. We're going to move that over by dividing. And we have a sine, a squared, and a 2. Squared is going to go next. So to undo the squared, we are going to take the square root. Yesterday, or on the last video, we learned that when you're taking the radical of a fraction, you just go radical on top and bottom. So that would be radical 3 over radical 4, and radical 4 is just 2. Now, whenever we're solving by taking a square root, we need a plus or minus in front. So make sure you put a plus or minus on there. Now the sine or the 2, sine is going to go next. So we're going to undo the sine by doing inverse sine. So we have to ask ourselves, what has a sine value of radical 3 over 2? Well, the sine value is our y value. So it's radical 3 over 2 there and there. And there's negative radical 3 over 2 here and here. All right, so we're actually going to have 4 separate answers here. So the sine value is radical 3 over 2 at pi over 3. That was our first one. 2 pi over 3. That's 4 pi over 3. And the last one here was 5 pi over 3. And then all you have to do is on every single one of these equations is just divide it by 2. The easier way to think of this is to do it without a calculator. Instead of dividing by 2, I'm going to multiply by a half. It'd be the same thing. So pi over 3 times a half, that would be pi over 6. 2 pi over 3 times a half, well, those 2's would cancel. You have pi over 3, or you would have 2 pi over 6 and then just reduce it. This one, 4 over 2 would be 2, so it would be 2 pi over 3. Or again, you could have 4 pi over 6 and reduce it. And then the last one would be 5 pi over 6. And that's going to be our answers for these. Now there's actually an infinite amount of answers because you have a bunch that are coterminal with all of these. So you would actually have an infinite number of them. We want all of ours to be on the interval 0 to 2 pi though. Just one rotation on the unit circle. So we don't have to worry about the infinite number of possibilities there. Okay, next one. This one, a little bit tougher, I think, because it has an x on both sides, so you might kind of get a little confused by it. What we would want to do is actually move it to where they're both on the same side. So I'm going to move this sign over. And the way that we're going to do that is just subtract it over. Now, in order to solve this, we're actually going to factor. See how they both have a sign here? We actually factor a sign out. When you divide this by sign, we had 3 of them, so we took 1 out, so now we're going to have 2 of them, so it'd be sine squared. When we divided this one out, we're just left with a 1. Now, think back to solving by factoring. You're going to use the zero product property. It just says to set each one of your terms here equal to 0, and then solve it. And then now we're just going to solve each equation. So this one, we're going to have to do inverse sine. So we're thinking to ourselves, what has a sine value of 0? And sine is our y value again. So y value is 0 here and here. So 0 and pi. For this one, we're going to have to move the 1 over. Take the square root. Hopefully you remembered we need plus or minus because we just took a square root. And then now we're going to do inverse sine. So we're thinking to ourselves, what is the sine value of 1 and what has the sine value of -1? Well, the sine values are y value again. So it's 1 here and it's -1 here. So we actually have only two values for that. We have pi over 2 and we have 1 pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, 3 pi over 2. And that's our answer for that. So now it's time for our joke. Let me think of one real quick. Did I tell you the one about the roof? I didn't? Don't worry, it's probably over your head. And that's going to be our code for the day. It's going to be roof. So make sure that you email that to me. Make sure you get your points for the day. Roof. Last one. So for this one, it looks really scary because you have sine, cosine, and tangent. One thing that we do notice though is we have a sine squared and a cosine squared. Whenever you see that, you should be kind of thinking of the one I told you to memorize, and that's sine squared plus cosine squared is 1. So I'm thinking if I move that over, I could then replace it with sine squared plus cosine squared is 1. And then that might make it a little bit easier because we don't have so many thetas running around. So we need to add that one over. So right here, we're going to use that trig identity. We're going to replace that with a 1. And then now we just have to do inverse tangents. We ask ourselves, what has a tangent value of 1? Think back to your unit circle. The tangent value is 1. I know that should be a pi over 4 family. But I don't know where else it's positive 1. So I know it's at pi over 4. To figure out our sign, it's all students take calculus. So in this quadrant, they're all positive, so the pi over 4. In the second quadrant, only sine is positive. So tangent is not going to be a positive 1 in this quadrant. The t, that's where tangent's going to be positive. So it's 1 pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 4 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4. And then it wouldn't be in this one because that one's only, cosine's the only positive. So that's it. All right, go ahead and start trying the day 2 homework. Email it to me by Friday. Don't forget to email me the code for the day as the answer to the joke. Enjoy the rest of your day.